Okay. So, you know how sometimes, like, a really random thought just catches fire
Oh,
online?
yeah. Something totally out of left field.
Exactly. Maybe seems a bit, I don't know, silly even, but suddenly everyone's debating it.
Mm-hmm. It happens all the time.
Well, that's what we're diving into today, this surprisingly persistent question. Could 100 unarmed men actually win a fight against a silverback gorilla?
It's really captured the imagination, hasn't it? And what's interesting, I think, is that if you dig into it, this hypothetical fight actually touches on some pretty deep stuff.
Like what?
Well, like human nature, our ideas about strength, our relationship with, the wild.
Right. Okay, so for this deep dive, we've pulled together quite a range of sources. We've got the Wikipedia entry that sort of tracks the whole meme,
Uh-huh.
a scientific paper from Oryx looking at human-wildlife interactions more broadly, not just conflict.
Good. Yeah. Context is key.
Then there's an article from the environmental blog really detailing gorilla strength, which is, wow.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
A student press piece with this really intense firsthand story of seeing gorillas in Uganda.
Oh, cool. A real encounter.
Yeah. Then Ultimate Kilimanjaro's list of strongest animals, an evolutionary take from the conversation, and an editorial from Social and Cultural Geography thinking about, like, the limits of the human body itself.
Quite a mix.
Yeah.
So we're not just trying to pick a winner here.
No, exactly. The goal isn't just, who wins the Rumble. It's more about unpacking what this whole viral debate tells us about, well, us, and about gorillas, obviously, and where we fit in the grand scheme of things.
Okay. Sounds good. Where do we start? The meme itself.
Yeah, let's do that. So this whole 100 men versus a gorilla thing, where did it actually, originate?
Okay, so according to the Wikipedia page, it looks like it first popped up on Reddit, specifically in Who Would Win.
Ah, that subreddit makes sense.
Yeah.
People debate hypotheticals there all the time.
Exactly. This was back in 2020, apparently, from a user called Probably Cash, and kind of bubbled around there. And then it seems to have migrated over to TikTok in 2022.
TikTok, yeah, I can see that. Short, punchy, gets a reaction.
Perfect for it. But the really big explosion seems to have been more recent, like April 2025.
And what kicked that off?
It seems to trace back to Mr. Beast. He put out this joke tweet, asking for 100 volunteers for this fight.
Oh, right. I think I saw that.
Yeah, and that tweet just went massive. Over 17 million views on Twitter. That really poured fuel on the fire, got everyone talking again.
17 million. For a joke about fighting a gorilla. It's amazing how things spread. And it wasn't just random people jumping in, right? Some bigger names weighed in, too.
That's right. Montana Senator Tim Sheehy actually posted a video. He seemed pretty convinced the men would clearly win, I think he said.
Seriously. Did he acknowledge the danger?
Oh, yeah. He did mention likely a high casualty rate. And Elon Musk replied to Mr. Beast, too, just with something like, sure, what's the worst that could happen?
Typical Musk. But not everyone was amused by this, were they?
No, definitely not. PETA, for instance, called out Mr. Beast pretty directly. They weren't happy about using animals, even hypothetically, in that kind of content.
Yeah, I can understand that perspective.
But then you had someone like Robert Irwin, the conservationist, offering a different angle. He suggested, maybe the question should be, how many people does it take to protect endangered species like gorillas?
That's a really powerful reframing.
It is. And interestingly, even the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund sort of acknowledged the meme. They expressed a hope, maybe a bit counterintuitive, that all this attention could actually raise awareness for gorilla conservation.
Wow. A strange path to conservation awareness, but maybe.
Maybe. And Wikipedia also mentioned the debate got tangled up in other online discussions, too, about, masculinity and ethics.
Yeah, it seems the whole setup, the large group versus this single powerful animal kind of tapped into some of those ongoing online conversations.
Interesting how these things connect.
Okay, so it goes viral, sparks debate, gets reactions from all sides. But let's get to the core of it, the actual power involved. That environmental blog piece really lays out the gorilla's strength, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. The numbers they cite are just staggering. Get this. They say a silverback can lift up to 1,796 pounds.
Wait, nearly 1,800 pounds? That's huge.
Huge. And they can sprint, apparently, at 25 miles per hour. And the bite force, 1,300 PSI.
PSI, pounds per square inch.
Yeah. And to put that in context, they say it's about 10 times stronger than the average human bite, enough to crush bone easily.
10 times. Okay, that alone is pretty terrifying. Did they compare it to, human athletes?
They did. They mentioned the world record deadlift is, what, around 1,100 pounds? Significantly less than what they estimate a gorilla can lift.
Right.
And our average bite force is maybe 160, 162 PSI compared to their 1,300. It's not even close.
No kidding. And what about like a punch? Did they estimate that?
Yeah, they estimate a gorilla's punch could deliver somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 pounds of force.
It's just incredible force. So evolutionarily speaking, why? Why are they so incredibly strong? It's not like they're hitting the gym.
Right. The blog gets into that. It's about survival in their environment.
Dense forests.
Right. They need strength to move through thick vegetation, maybe deter predators like leopards, climb trees, often while carrying their young.
Makes sense. Survival adaptations.
And they also mention high testosterone levels in silverbacks. That plays a big role in building that massive muscle mass and also, contributes to their dominance and protective behaviors when they need to be assertive.
So environment, hormones, behavior,
Yep.
all connects. And there was something about muscle fiber types too. That was
Wow.
interesting.
Yes. That's crucial. Gorillas have a much higher percentage of fast-twitch muscle fibers.
Okay, remind me what that means.
Fast-twitch fibers are for, short bursts of explosive power. Think sprinting, jumping, lifting heavy things quickly.
Gotcha. Explosive strength.
Exactly. Humans, on the other hand, we have more of a mix. We have fast-twitch, but also more slow-twitch fibers, which are better for endurance, sustained activity.
So they're built like powerlifters, and we're more like marathon runners, relatively speaking.
That's a decent analogy, yeah. Power bursts versus going the distance.
Okay. And just their sheer size. How much does a silverback actually weigh? I feel like I've heard different numbers.
Yeah, sources vary a bit. The environmental blog says up to 430 pounds for adult males.
Yeah.
But that student press article, the one about the trek in Uganda, it mentions them being up to 600 pounds of rippling muscle.
600 pounds. That's a big difference.
It is. Ultimate Kilimanjaro's list puts them around 440 pounds. So the consensus is definitely massive and powerful, maybe somewhere in that 400, 600 pound range, depending on the individual and maybe location.
Either way, incredibly imposing. And that student article, you said it had some vivid descriptions.
It really did. The author mentioned being told things like a gorilla's hands could crush a human skull or snap your arms like wishbones, that they can uproot small trees without much effort, press 1,000 pounds overhead easily. It really paints a picture of just raw, immense physical capability.
Okay, so point taken. Individual gorilla is unbelievably strong. But the experts you mentioned earlier, they had slightly different takes, didn't they? They brought in other factors.
They did, and this is where it gets more nuanced. Dr. Tara Stoinski from the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. She made a really important point. People often overestimate how aggressive gorillas normally are.
Right, they're not constantly looking for a fight.
Exactly. And she suggested that a large group of humans, using cooperation and coordination, might be able to prolong a fight, maybe even wear the gorilla down eventually.
Ah, so the human advantage isn't strength, it's teamwork, strategy.
That seems to be her thinking. The sheer numbers and the ability to work together, even unarmed, could potentially be a factor over time. Exhaustion.
Okay. Does anyone else back that up?
Well, Dr. Michelle Rodriguez, a primatologist, kind of supports the non-aggression point. She emphasized that gorillas generally prefer to avoid conflict. They'd likely try to escape a chaotic, overwhelming situation like 100 people coming at them. They pick their battles, as she put it.
So maybe the gorilla just leaves. That's one outcome.
Potentially. Flight, not fight. But then you have Ron McGill from Zoo Miami. His take was a bit, starker.
How so?
He thought the humans could possibly win, but only through a very specific coordinated tactic, basically swarming the gorilla, trying to create what he called a human straitjacket.
A human straitjacket. That sounds brutal
Yeah,
and dangerous.
extremely. He explicitly warned there would be deaths and very serious injuries among the humans, things like concussions, severe bite wounds, broken necks, a horrific cost.
Yeah, that paints a grim picture. What about Dr. Kat Hobater? Was she more optimistic for the humans?
No, quite the opposite, actually. Her view was pretty clear. If the humans just attack one by one, or even in small groups without perfect coordination, they wouldn't stand a chance.
Right. The gorilla's speed and power would just be too much for individuals.
Exactly. Overwhelm them very quickly.
So it really hinges on that perfect, maybe impossible coordination. Then there's the evolutionary expert, Dr. Joannes Boyau.
Or no, Joannes Boyau, yeah. From the conversation piece. He basically agreed, one-on-one, Gorilla wins easily. Brute force is just too disparate.
But there's a but.
The but is that human strength isn't primarily about brute force anymore. He argued our real evolutionary advantage lies in other things: adaptability, large-scale collaboration, much larger groups than gorillas manage our bigger brains, abstract thought, symbolic language.
Tools, technology.
Well, even without tools in this scenario, just the ability to plan, communicate complex strategies, pass knowledge down, he framed it as an evolutionary trade-off. We traded some raw physical power for intelligence and social complexity.
Traded muscles for minds. I like that.
Yeah.
So, summing up the experts, gorilla power is immense. Human victory might be theoretically possible with perfect coordination of numbers, but likely at a terrible cost. And our real strength lies elsewhere anyway.
That seems a fair summary of their views, yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. That Oryx paper on human-wildlife interactions.
Mm.
How does looking at that bigger picture help us think about this, frankly, bizarre hypothetical?
Well, the Oryx paper is great because it forces us to move beyond just thinking about conflict. It lays out this framework for understanding all the ways humans and wildlife interact.
Okay, what's in the framework?
It talks about things like our underlying values, how we view nature, our social interactions around wildlife, how dependent we are on shared resources, how we perceive risk, and just the specific nature of any given encounter. It's much richer than just fight or flight.
So it's saying our relationship with animals is shaped by a whole lot more than just who's stronger.
Precisely. The paper shows how different communities react differently. Some might be indifferent, some might really appreciate wildlife, some might even feel a sense of stewardship, wanting to protect them.
And values play a big role.
A huge role. They use the example of the Maasai people and cattle. Cattle are so central to their culture and livelihood. So naturally, their perception of lions, which can prey on cattle, is often more negative than their perception of, say, elephants that don't pose the same direct threat to their core values.
That makes total sense. Our values shape our view, which shapes our actions.
Exactly. And the paper also talks about social dynamics trust between communities and conservation groups, for example. Good relationships make managing interactions much easier. And of course, the details of any specific encounter matter hugely. Was anyone harmed? Where did it happen? What was the animal actually doing?
Right. All that context gets completely stripped away in the 100 men versus gorilla meme. It's just pure abstract conflict.
Completely abstract. And the paper makes a really important point at the end. These interactions, the real ones, are likely to increase.
Why is that?
Things like habitat shrinking, climate change, forcing animals into new areas, sometimes even conservation successes leading to larger wildlife populations near people. So understanding tolerance, finding ways to coexist peacefully is becoming more and more critical.
Which brings us to that social and cultural geography editorial about the limits of the body. How does thinking about our physical limits fit in here?
That editorial pushes us to think about what limit even means physically. Where does our body end? What are our capacities, our thresholds? And connecting it back to the gorilla debate, it reinforces that evolutionary point we discussed.
The trade-off.
Yeah, humans have arguably evolved past relying purely on our physical limits in the way a gorilla does. Our trajectory has been towards intellect, society, tools. The gorilla, in this context, almost represents a kind of physical peak that we took a different path from.
So the hypothetical fight is almost testing a limit we've evolved beyond relying on.
In a way, yes. And the editorial also implicitly brings in tools and technology. We extend our limits constantly. The unarmed nature of the fight is key in almost any real serious encounter. Humans would use tools. That's fundamental to who we are.
That's a crucial point. The whole scenario is unrealistic because it removes one of our defining characteristics, tool use.
Cool.
Okay, now that student press article, The Real Life Encounter, that must put a totally different spin on things.
Absolutely. Reading that account of trekking through Bwindi National Park in Uganda, the difficulty of just getting there, and then being in the presence of mountain gorillas, it conveys a sense of awe and power that statistics just can't capture.
What did the author describe?
Close encounters. Seeing a female gorilla grazing just feet away, a baby gorilla showing curiosity, and then the silverback, just the sheer presence, the quiet authority. It really emphasizes the respect they command in their own space.
Must have been incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And humbling, I imagine.
Definitely sounds like it. And the author connects it back to Dian Fossey's work, reminding us these are critically endangered animals. Only maybe 750 to 1,000 mountain gorillas left in the wild.
So few.
Yeah, and the threats they face are overwhelmingly from us. Poaching, deforestation, climate change impacts. The article really drives home that these animals deserve protection and respect, not, being cast as opponents in some fantasy fight club.
Absolutely. You mentioned Digit, too, right? The
Right.
gorilla who died defending his group.
Yes, Digit. A real-life example of guerrilla bravery and strength, but in the context of defending his family from actual human threats, poachers. A very different kind of strength narrative.
Okay, so we've covered the meme, the strength stats, expert opinions, the broader context of human-wildlife interaction, physical limits, and a real-world perspective. Bringing it all together. What are the main takeaways from this surprisingly deep dive into a kind of silly question?
Well, I think it's clear that while a single gorilla possesses truly immense physical power, far beyond a single human, the whole scenario pushes us to think deeper. About human cooperation, strategy, our unique evolutionary path relying on brains and social bonds more than just muscle. And maybe most importantly, about our complex, often fraught relationship with the natural world.
It does make you wonder why this particular question grabbed people so much. What is it about pitting ourselves against this symbol of raw natural power?
That's a great question to ponder. Maybe it taps into something primal. A way to think about our own strength, our vulnerability, our place in the face of something so powerful and untamed.
Yeah, maybe. So, beyond just figuring out who might limp away from this hypothetical fight, what's the real point for us, for you listening?
I think the opportunity here is to pivot from the hypothetical violence to the real world situation. Gorillas are facing threats. Maybe the takeaway is to learn more about them, support conservation efforts. Organizations like the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund, the World Wildlife Fund, they're doing vital work.
Right. Turn the fascination into positive action. That's a much better outcome.
Definitely.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. In a world that we humans are reshaping so profoundly, what does our continued fascination with conquering nature, even in a fantasy scenario like 100 men versus a gorilla, really say about how we see our role within it? Something to think about. Thanks so much for unpacking all this with me.
My pleasure. It was fascinating.